Hi everyone, my name is Christian Baines. I am the author of the new paranormal mystery Sins of the Sun, which came out just last month, and welcome to my first ever video reading. So I've never done one of these before, but I am very excited to be sharing one with you for the first time. I have my wine, I have a book full of sexy vampires and warlocks and a bunch of single-minded religious fundamentalist assassins. There's a lot of action in this book. So I always say the books in the Arcadia Trust series are a slightly different genre each time. So this is the action movie in the series. It continues the kind of mystery that's been building throughout the series. So if you want to think of it as like, I don't know, Die Hard by way of David Lynch, I would be incredibly flattered by that. But so the scene I'm going to read from you is set in Reylan's favourite nighttime cafe. If you're new to the series, Reylan is the main character. He is a bloodshade or vampire, as the uninitiated would know him. And he's pretty self-reliant. He lives on the fringes of Sydney's Oxford Street, which is the main gay precinct in Sydney. And he likes to look after himself. And a young man he has picked up from one of the clubs has attempted to kill him. And through various circumstances and events, he's had to take this young man into his care. But this young guy bears a frightening resemblance to someone Reylan knew very well. And that's all I think you need to know to come into the book. You can read. You don't have to have read the previous books to enjoy Sins of the Sun. I just want that absolutely clear. But that's all the background you should need for this scene. So this is Sins of the Sun. I hope you enjoy. Luca, on the other hand, just glowered at me. Go on then, I said in Italian. Say it. You lie, he hissed in English. He was my friend. I should think you'd be pleased. Had you been smart enough to leave me alone, you could have pissed off back to Rome already and stayed out of my hair. Luca pounded his fists on the table and stood up, breathing heavily as he snatched up a butter knife, the only cutlery on the table, and brandished it at me. And what do you think you're going to do with that? Maledetto. Oh, for God's sake. Yes, yes, maledetto. Demon. Accursed. The damned. You've used that one already, and it's getting tedious, particularly since you currently owe your very life to the same. Now, we can either talk about what that means, or you can sit there quietly until the food arrives, which you will eat. His hand flexed around the knife, and his lips tightened into a snarl. Sit the fuck down, I barked, compelling him to obey with the aid of just a little bloodshade trickery that went straight for his nerves. I tossed a conciliatory glance at Deborah, who'd rushed in to check on the commotion. She slank back into the kitchen without a word, though the look in her eyes said plenty. Luca, meanwhile, was too afraid to meet mine. Look at me. I won't ask twice. A faint tremble hung on his face when he finally did, hiding the knowledge that I'd used aspects of his darkest fears and insecurities to control him. Who was your primary target? Ross? Me? Both of us? Silence. Answer! I compelled him again. He dropped the knife on the table, wincing as the words seared his nerves. You are the reason he is damned. Your death would have brought him to me. He would want to avenge you. Not now, he won't. Because you killed him. Now, we both know that's not true, don't we? And let me make another thing quite clear. Had you succeeded in killing Ross, I would have personally ensured you a death far slower and more painful than any you, Patricia, or anyone else might imagine. Consider that before you lament your failure. He turned away. Did he really see me as the architect of Ross's damnation? Just because I had saved Ross all those years ago, sparing him the honour killing so favoured by the Scimitar of Light? Or was it my fault that Ross had rejected that fate? Either way, I'd not been wrong. So what now? I asked. You can't go home. You'll be dead without a little of my blood every few days. I'm not your dog, he snapped as Brett and Deborah returned from the kitchen. Come here and say that, you little... I hushed Brett with a raised hand, not taking my eyes off Luca. Let's be clear on one thing. I'll keep you alive because that's the choice I made. But I didn't make it for you. You'll have to earn what Brett has. Until then, you're a little more to me than an annoying obligation. Is that understood? The kid frowned, crossing his arms and looking at Deborah, who stood with a plate of pasta. You're welcome, she said. He's paying you, yes? Luca sneered. He can find something far less appealing to sustain you if you don't fix your attitude. I watched closely as Deborah set the plate down. She backed away slowly, not taking her eyes off the angry youth as he sniffed at it. Well? I asked. He raised a fork, tossing the penne around the plate. There's sausage in it. That's the point, and it's awesome. Now eat it. Brett remained at my side, just a holstered gun short of being the perfect bodyguard cliché. The boy stabbed a piece of penne and made a show of shoveling it in. Then another, with no less sarcasm. But just as I expected him to drop the fork with contempt, he slowed his chewing. A thoughtful look crossed his face as he skewered a piece of chorizo and stared at it. Told you, murmured Brett. The plate's contents soon disappeared with speed. Within minutes, nothing remained but a slick layer of red oil. I'll take that as a rave review, said Deborah, who refreshed my tea. Luca shrugged. Was okay. His head tilted sharply in the direction of the front door as its bell sounded. In walked a man wearing a soiled khaki jacket. Long greying hair fell over his collar in greasy waves, and his gait carried a distinct nervousness. Can I get you something? Deborah asked, returning to her spot behind the counter. Yeah, I guess. The fellow unzipped his jacket. I'll get a cap. Cappuccino? Sure. Thanks. And whatever you've got in the till, thanks, love. The man had barely pulled his gun before a teapot sailed through the air, finding its mark on the man's cheekbone and shattering, drenching his face with steaming hot blood tea. My peripheral vision caught Deborah ducking behind the counter as the man screamed, right before Luca leapt onto the table, then bounded in the man's direction. I hadn't even seen him throw the pot. Sending the would-be thief stumbling back with a kick to the face, Luca landed, only to latch onto his prey again, forcing him down with a clatter as the gun skidded across the floor. Not missing a beat, Luca raised a butter knife and plunged it into the man's throat with no more difficulty than if he'd been wielding a sharpened dagger. Blood spurted from the wound. Brett snatched up the gun and held it on the two of them. Our hostess, meanwhile, had procured her own, wisely keeping the counter between herself and the battle unfolding on the floor. Still, 2 loaded and cocked guns in the room was 2 more than I would have liked. What's more, the bitter scent of the man's blood distracted me. One of the crackheads Deborah had told us about, who'd made her night shift so unbearable. All right, I said, calm and collected as I could manage. Let's put the guns down. Everything's all right. Jesus fuck, Reylan, there's a dead guy on my floor. Things are not all right. Brett moved swiftly to the front door and locked it, pulling the blinds closed. Lights? In the back, on your left, Deborah commanded, not taking her aim off Luca and the dying crackhead. What are you going to do about this? We'll take care of it. Oh, that is a given. You are definitely taking care of this because I watched the colour drain from her face as her voice trailed off. Deborah, what's wrong? What's happening to him? I put a cautious foot forward. Luca, can you... The face that whipped around was near unrecognizable. Its pallor now bone white, and, save for lips, the colour of darkened congealed blood. That was to say nothing of the crackhead's blood staining the thing's mouth. Catching my attention, though, were the teeth, 2 brutal incisors, longer than any on a bloodshade that I'd seen, dripping with the saliva of a predator's hunger. Luca, I whispered, right before Brett turned on the lights, leaving the room illuminated only by what little street light crept through the blinds. The boy creature's head whipped around again, and he resumed feasting. I could barely make out the whimpers of the dying man under Luca's snarls and Deborah's shrill cry of alarm. Reylan, do something or I will shoot this fucker, I swear. The silhouette of the gun shook in her hand. Don't move. Brett, damn it, turn the light back on. As soon as my mannequin obeyed, the hideous creature that had once been Luca shrieked, covering his face. It leapt off its prey and barreled toward me, hitting with a force like a speeding car. Unable to stop it, I instead rolled with it to the floor, using the thing's momentum to push it away. It smashed through the front door in a splintering of broken blinds and glass before disappearing up the street. I forced the door open and looked out after it, barely glimpsing a shadow before it rounded the end of the block. And if you'd like to know where it went, Sins of the Sun is now available through Amazon or preferably your favorite independent bookshop. So thanks very much for watching. I hope to do a couple more of these here and there. In the meantime, I wish you a very good night and very happy reading. Bye.